Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the 2024 RBC Canadian Open taking place at Hamilton Golf and Country Club, which has been the host of this event before, but it has undergone some changes. And so here in this episode, we're going to tell you what those changes are, what you can expect from play this weekend, who you need to be targeting for your DFS lineups, betting cards, and one and dones for this great tournament, because I really do wish this event got a little more shine. With it being like a national Open, like I feel like it should be a little bit bigger deal than it is. I feel the same way about the Mexico Open. I feel the same way about when the DP World Tour plays the Australian Open or the French Open. Like there needs to be a little more press, a little more hype for a national Open, in my opinion. But anyway, that's a conversation for another point in time. We're here to break down who is in fact the best plays for this year's RBC Canadian Open. Now, this episode is coming to you a little bit later than usual. Yesterday was traveling, home from a trip to the beach on Memorial Day, and I mentioned on the before, but I have a now almost 9-month-old daughter that we've traveled quite a lot with, but every time we've traveled, it's either been after I get home from school for the day, or like overnight, or like early in the morning. So it's been at times where she's been asleep, and it's been kind of easy because you just drive straight through and she just sleeps straight through it, right? Well, yesterday we left in the middle of the day, and a trip that normally would take us 4.5 hours took us about 8 because she was awake and she needed changing and she needed feeding and she needed time out the car seat, and it was just a lot. And so just didn't have the time to research and record a quality show, and plus I was exhausted at the end of the day. So that is why this episode is coming to you a day late. We will still have the weekly article heading up on Patreon tomorrow, as well as the DFS scores for DraftKings and FanDuel, as well as the model top 10 heading up on Patreon tomorrow. So that'll still be as scheduled. This episode is just a day late. We will be back next week talking the Memorial Tournament as well. And we're also going to have some additional one and done content coming up. So you're going to want to be subscribed to the channel. If you play one and done, we're going to have some additional content for you, some extra strategy, extra advice videos to help you really take advantage of this upcoming stretch on one and done, because it is a big one. All right, now, if you like what we do here at Mike's Money Picks, please help me out and hit the like button, and please go ahead and subscribe. That you can be with us for the rest of the PGA Tour season. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into this new golf course, Hamilton Golf and Country Club. Like I said, there's been some changes, and we're going to tell you how that's going to affect you. So Hamilton Golf and Country Club may have hosted this event 5 years ago, but it is going to look significantly different now than it did that year. Now, in that year, in 2019, it was won by Rory McIlroy. We're going to take a look at that leaderboard, by the way. And Rory was kind of the outlier from the play style that ended up prevailing here at this course. Back then, it was a par 70, and it played at a little over 6,800 yards. It has been lengthened by about 200 yards and now plays still as a par 70, but about 7,000 yards. What's interesting is that the architect of this course, Harry Colt, he was very much an international architect. He also designed Royal Portrush in Northern Ireland, also designed Royal Liverpool in England, and also designed Wentworth, which is in England. And I think that Wentworth, if you have access to data for it, is actually a course that has a lot of crossover success. Rory McIlroy and Shane Lowry being two that had a lot of success at Wentworth, and have had a lot of success at this course. Well, they were 1 and 2 the one time it was played here. Now, this is going to be a short course, but I do not think that it's going to be a super positional one off the tee. This is not like super narrow confines like a Colonial or a Harbor Town. I really don't know what guys are going to do off the tee this week, though. That's to me is the hardest aspect to predict, because there's a lot of holes where if you're able to carry it 300 yards, you're going to be able to hit it over the hazards and over the bunkers, right? Which there are a lot of fairway bunkers that were added as a part of the renovation of this golf course. So if you can hit it a long ways, you can get over the bunkers. But the question is it worth it to hit it a long ways if you end up in thick rough? One of the characteristics of the Canadian Open in recent years is that whatever the host course had been, they have let the rough grow out. And so there's been kind of this almost preparation for the U.S. Open, and you do not want to be in the rough. You want to be in the fairway. So the question is, are guys going to try to bomb driver and be okay with being in the rough, or are they going to lay back a little bit, prioritize being in the fairway? Because if you go with a driver heavy approach, you're going to have a lot of wedges into greens. If you go with a more laid back approach, you're going to have a lot of short and middle irons into the greens. There are a few dog leg holes as well that are going to force layups. So even if guys, have a prevailing strategy of driver, it's not going to be the move of choice every single hole. The par threes are what's going to be the most difficult aspect of this course. They're all super long par threes. They're all going to play pretty difficult. Now, in terms of the changes from 2019, like I said, there was a lot of bunkers that were added. And also on a lot of holes, greenside bunkers were removed in favor of short grass runoff areas. We talked about this a lot at Memorial Park. We talked about this at Augusta National. We talked about this at Riviera. We're going to talk about it a lot at Pinehurst number 2, where if you miss a green, you're not just going to be, having your ball sit down in rough and you being able to just kind of pop it up into the air and get the chip to go wherever you want it to go, a lot of what happened at Valhalla, a lot of what will happen in Muirfield Village. But, short grass runoff areas, cause a different type of short game shot, cause a different type of creativity. And it's definitely a skill that some guys have and some guys don't. So the bottom line is you're going to want to be hitting greens this week. You're going to have a lot of those short grass, short game shots. Now, these are also some of the smallest greens on the PGA Tour. They are technically bent grass with a little bit of a Poa trivialis mix. This is what you see a lot of on the East Coast and on kind of like the Northeast. If you're looking, into data, I think that it would be okay to still look at, pure bent grass and with a bent Poa mix. I don't think that there's a whole lot to be gained by being able to differentiate between the two of them. This bent Poa mix is what you see at TPC River Highlands. It is what you see at Detroit Golf Club. These greens also have a decent amount of undulation. So as small as they are, this is a place where, you're going to have to putt well if you want to win. And if you look at the leaderboard from 2019, that is what the story is told. Pretty much the entire top 10 gained strokes putting. Now, to me, every time that is said, it's kind of like the old meme with, the plane with all the bullet holes, the survivorship bias plane. I have no idea how to explain it, but if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Just Google survivorship bias. Basically, of course, the guys who gain putting are going to be able to find their way to the top of the leaderboard. But what you see when you look at these different names is you see a variety of long hitters, short hitters, great iron players, great short gamers that, the prevailing strategy here doesn't really, there's not really a prevailing strategy at the end of the day. The bottom line is find a way to get your ball on the green and find a way to make a putt. And the putter is going to be a big time way that you can separate yourself here this week. Rory McIlroy won this event at 22 under the last time it was at Hamilton. But the crazy thing about that is he won by 7 shots. Second place was Shane Lowry and Webb Simpson at -15. So I do not think that this course is going to get to -22 this week. The only way I could see that happening, which it has already started this week, if there continues to be rain in this part of Canada and the course gets to be super soft and super soggy and just saturated, I could see it playing a little bit easier, kind of like what happened at Valhalla. But I really do think that this is a more difficult setup now than it was back in 2019. And I really think the winning score is going to be -14 to 16-ish, if I had to guess. But anyway, you look at the rest of this leaderboard. After Rory and Lowry, it's not really a lot of long hitters. Webb Simpson, Brandt Snedeker, Matt Kuchar, who are all in the field this week, by the way, but all are not, not at the peak of their powers like they were in 2019. Followed by Adam Hadwin, Sungjae Im, Graham McDowell, Henrik Stenson, those last 3 not in the field this week. And then Danny Willett rounding out the top 10 with a few other, names near the top: Sebastian Moose, Cameron Tringale, Kyle Morikawa, Stephen Yeager, Mackenzie Hughes was T14, Ben Silverman T20. So you just see this wide variety of golfer in skill levels that succeeded here, right? So I really don't think there's going to be one prevailing strategy. And like I said, I think the key is going to be get it on the green, make your putt, walk away with birdie, and go from there. So for the key stats for Hamilton Golf and Country Club, I am going to be heavily prioritizing strokes gained on approach this week. If you have the ability to look at strokes gained around the green from short grass only, I think that is a very good skill set to have this week. I'm going to be looking at strokes gained putting on bent grass or the bent Poa mix. I don't think the particulars really matter. And I'm going to be looking at performance for comp courses. And the reason why I'm saying that on here is because I have quite a lot of comp courses. Some of them are going to feature similar agronomy like the other Canadian Open courses like Oakdale and St. George's. TPC Deer Run is going to feature a similar distance, similar elevation changes, also bent grass greens. Detroit Golf Club, very similar agronomy. TPC River Highlands, very similar agronomy. very similar distance, very similar elevation changes. And then I think you can also look at the other courses designed by this architect, Harry Colt, with Royal Liverpool, Royal Portrush, and Wentworth. And then lastly, I think Sedgefield can be a comp course as well. Just another short par 70 that features a lot of elevation changes. And I think when you look at the flyover, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Sedgefield. So like I said, I've got a ton of comp courses because I can't really narrow down one prevailing play style here. But if you've had success at any of those courses, that is going to allow me to give you a little bit of a boost this week. And that is going to be something that I am going to be targeting heavily. All right. So with that being said, let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then we are going. All right, so if you've been with us for this PGA Tour season, you know that when I say the rabbit hole, I'm actually referring to a tool used or created by BetSperts Golf that is known as the rabbit hole. And what they do with the rabbit hole is they have a ton of statistical options and conditions and filters that you can really use to get in the weeds and pick out specific skill sets and specific features on specific courses that you like for certain golfers, and compile that into a custom model. It has been a great tool for me this season. It's allowed me to get on some guys that I might not have been previously. Davis Riley was actually a guy that showed up last week pretty well for me, and so I was able to get him in a few lineups, which I'm certainly very thankful for. This week we're going to see what we got, right? So one thing that I said I was going to prioritize, and I'm going to continue to prioritize it, is recent approach play. So in terms of just the last 16 rounds, the top guys in the field in terms of approach play have been Patton Kizzire, Corey Connors, Davis Thompson, Grayson Sigg, and Dylan Wu. Now, if you extrapolate that approach play out just a little bit into the calendar year 2024, the top list is slightly different, but also kind of the same. You've got Corey Connors, Keith Mitchell, Shane Lowry, Grayson Sigg, Aaron Rye, Davis Thompson, Patton Kizzire, Kevin Yu, Justin Lauer, and Chandler Phillips as your top 10. Adam Svensson just on the outside looking in. Now, this is not going to be a huge priority, but I mentioned to you guys earlier that I do think that carry distance is something that can help you this week. If you can carry your golf ball 300 plus yards, you can avoid the fairway bunkers. And if you're willing to play out of the rough, you're going to have wedges into greens if that is your choice. So I decided to just look at this field and figure out who the top guys in carry distance were. So these are the Mad Bombers of this field: Cameron Champ, Rory McIlroy, Kevin Doherty, Taylor Pendrith, Joseph Bramlett, Pearson Coody, Gary Woodland, Hayden Springer, William Furr, and Keith Mitchell. I also wanted to look at strokes gained off the tee and driving accuracy from courses with thick rough, because I do think that will be the setup this week. It should come as no surprise that just pure strokes gained off the tee in thick rough, Rory McIlroy is number one, followed by Keith Mitchell, Gary Kago, Vince Whaley, and Kevin Yu. And then driving accuracy on courses with thick rough, you get a very eclectic bunch: Ryan Moore, Aaron Rye, Ben Silverman, Bryce Garnett, and Zach Blair as the top five, with Aaron Cockerell coming in number 6. More on him a little bit later. I also want to look at strokes gained approach on courses with small greens over the last year and a half, because I do think that that is a feature that it will come into play a little bit this week, because these greens are not small. They are quite hard to hit. So the top 5 in that category is Shane Lowry, Chez Reavie, Grayson Sigg, Mark Hubbard, and Rory McIlroy. Rory popping up as number 5 in that category. Big plus in my opinion. I also want to look at scrambling from short grass only. And this is quite a kind of a tough stat to look at, because some guys have some very small sample sizes. But Alistair Doherty was number 1, followed by Kelly Craft, Maverick McNeely, more on him later, Bud Cauley, and Grayson Sigg as the top 5, with Sammy Valimaki, Ryan Moore, Doug Gim, Eric Cole, and Cam Champ rounding out the top 10. I also looked at strokes gained putting on only bent or bent POA mix courses. And the top 10 for that, the putting is going to be something I prioritize this week, because really, if there's a complete variability of strategies that can be used off the tee, and the around the green play is going to be tough for everybody, then the putter is going to be a great way that you can separate yourself this week. And that's kind of how the leaderboard bared itself out in 2019, was the prevailing strategy into the green did not matter. How you performed on the greens did matter. So I am prioritizing putting this week. The top 10 on this list for putting for bent or bent POA mix: Chesson Hadley, Syed Thagawa, Harry Hall, Austin Cook, Mackenzie Hughes, Tommy Fleetwood, Aaron Baddeley, Alex Noren, Justin Lauer, and Bo Hostler, with Maverick McNeely just on the outside looking in. And then I threw all those comp courses into a blender, and I wanted to know who were the best players at those comp courses in this field. There's a lot that did not meet the minimum rounds requirement, but the top 10 is Rory McIlroy, Kevin Kisner, Tom Kim, Tommy Fleetwood, Aaron Rai, Mark Hubbard, Sam Burns, Cameron Young, Ches Reavie, and Corey Connors. Now, throw all of that into a blender, and what you end up with, which should come as no surprise, is Rory McIlroy, number 1, followed by Corey Connors, number 2. That one was a little bit surprising for me. I think that Corey Connors, and we're going to talk about this when we get to the DFS board, is in a group of guys that I would be very much willing to bet for a top 20. I would not put any money on them to win outright. I would probably not play them in a whole lot of GP lineups on FanDuel or DraftKings, but I think he's a very safe top 20 bet, and I think he is the captain of that team. Third place in my model is Sahith Theegala, followed by Aaron Rai, Alex Noren, Shane Lowry, Keith Mitchell, which should come as no surprise because for whatever reason, Keith Mitchell seems to play well at whatever courses Rory plays well at. Adam Svensson, number 8. Grayson Sigg, number 9. That one kind of surprised me. I'm going to have to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into the Sigg. Cameron Young, number 10. Just outside looking in the top 10, you've got Berger, Gim, Scott, Burns, Lauer, and Tom Kim, with Tommy Fleetwood at 17. Mark Hubbard, Kelly Craft, Kevin Yu rounding out the top 20. Some interesting names on there, but definitely gives me a little bit to go off of. And I'm going to continue tinkering with this model throughout the week. So now's a good time to go ahead and say, if you do want to know who ends up in the top 10 in my final model, as well as my final DFS course for FanDuel and DraftKings, you can get those from the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike'sMoneyPicks. I publish the weekly core and article every single Wednesday for the PGA Tour. And I have got some in the works, but not out. Best ball content for NFL, season-long fantasy football content for NFL, and then when college football and college basketball start, you will get the weekly DFS cores for every college football and college basketball slate. So if you want to get in on that, go ahead. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description. If you play DFS for a lot of different sports and you're just looking for people to talk DFS with or bounce ideas off of, Fantasy Corner Discord is a great place to go. Golf is one of the sports that we cover in there. But also right now we've got MLB, NBA. There's even some guys that have done very well in the WNBA DFS streets. So if you're looking to get better at DFS, the Fantasy Corner Discord is a great place to go. All right, so let's go ahead and end the segment right here. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the DraftKings board and see who we want in our DFS lineups and on our betting cards. So taking a look at the board on DraftKings, we have a whale this week, y'all. And what I mean by that is, like we've seen in recent weeks with Scotty Scheffler more often than not, we have a guy who is significantly higher priced than the rest of the board on DraftKings, and it is that way on FanDuel as well. And this week it is Rory McIlroy that is the whale. Now, when you think back to the previous weeks where we've had a whale, I really think that the prevailing strategy in those weeks, I know I'm using the word prevailing a lot this week, but just let me have this, okay? So the prevailing strategy has been to play the whale and find the other pieces around him that work. You think back to the Houston Open back in March. Scotty finishes T2. The winner was Steven Yeager. It was quite possible to have a Steven Yeager and Scotty Scheffler line because Steven Yeager was in the 8K range. There was nothing inhibiting you from getting a Steven Yeager if you were playing Scotty Scheffler. And the next time where the whale was in play was the Valero Texas Open, TPC San Antonio. Rory McIlroy was significantly priced ahead of everybody else. He came in third place. Akshay Bhatia and Denny McCarthy came 1-2. They were both in the 7K range. It was quite possible to have a Rory, Akshay, Denny lineup. I actually had a Rory. I was quite live that week. So, again, playing the big whale up top did not inhibit your ability to get to the guys down below. You look at last week at the Charles Schwab Challenge. Scotty Scheffler finishes T2. Davis Riley, from a salary of $5,700 on DraftKings, wins the tournament. And Davis Riley was probably a guy that you put in to enable yourself for Scotty Scheffler to work in your lineup. So there were probably a ton of Riley Scheffler lineups out there. I would be willing to bet, knowing that the general ownership of Scotty Scheffler was like 40 to 50%, I would be willing to bet that the percentage of Davis Riley lineups that had Scotty Scheffler in it were closer to probably 60 to 70%, because why else would you be paying down to Davis Riley if you were not trying to pay up to Scotty Scheffler? So what I think you're seeing from a pure DFS perspective here, y'all, is that when you have a whale, the results in 2024 so far have indicated that you just play the whale and find a way to make the rest work around it and hope that you are right. The way that strategy would not work is if Rory McIlroy does not play the guys who are right behind him in pricing. So Theegala, Fleetwood, Lowry, Noren, Young. If 2, 3, 4 of those guys beat Rory McIlroy, then maybe, it does not appear that that is the strategy that ends up playing itself out. But so far this year, every time we've had a situation like this, it has been to anybody's benefit to play the guy at the top of the board and try to figure out the rest around him. Now, I do not think that Rory is going to come in at the ownership in DFS that we saw last week for Scheffler. I think he's going to be about probably 25 to 30%. I will probably be over the field to Rory McIlroy because, like I said, I think that strategy is the one that is going to play itself out. I think that the winner of this event, if it's not Rory McIlroy, is probably not going to come from the guys right behind Rory McIlroy in terms of salary. Now, in terms of betting this event, I will not be betting Rory McIlroy to win. Just those odds on betting a golfer to win, I'm just not a fan of. Now, what I will be doing this week, I hit another top 20 parlay last week. Now, Tony Finau going +3 in the last 4 holes caused me to dead heat it as opposed to winning outright. But I'm probably going to be continuing to put together a top 20 parlay so that way, if Rory does boat race everybody, and I know I'm not betting Rory, I'm still able to put together a profitable week. Last week I had Scheffler, Finau, and Straka for, a pretty stress-free top 20 parlay until Finau kind of folded on me at the end, but it still gets great as a win, still was a profitable week for that reason. So, that's probably going to be what I'm going to be putting together this week as opposed to trying to bet outright winners, because I do think that in a field like this, there's a good chance that Rory boat races the entire field, but I also just can't get behind betting a guy at that number. Just my personal opinion. Now, right behind Rory is Sahith Theegala. So one thing that I'm going to mention for multiple guys this week is you need to be able to have a ceiling to win this week. You need to be able to have one part of your game just go nuclear and come through in that regard. Well, Sahith can do that in pretty much every aspect of his game. You look at his 2024 season so far, he has had spike rounds off the tee, spike tournaments, I should say, off the tee, on approach, and with the putter. What's really interesting is that some of his best approach rounds, or approach tournaments, I should say, have come at shorter courses like the Heritage and the Players. To me, that bodes well for a course like this where he's not going to have a lot of long irons into greens. And he also had a very good week with putting on bent grass at the PGA Championship. So I really do like Sahith this week. I think if you're not paying up for Rory, Sahith will be the guy that I would want to go with. Because after Sahith, I think there's some serious question marks. Tommy Fleetwood, to me, is the captain of the top 20 team. He's probably going to be in my top 20 parlays, like a lot of them. To me, he just has a T13 finish written. He's got a very well-rounded game to where he doesn't really spike in any aspects of it. And I think it's highly likely he comes in the 10th to 20th place at this tournament. I will probably not be playing him in a lot of GPPs and DFS for that reason. I feel the same exact way about Alex Noren. I feel the same exact way about Corey Connors. I feel the same exact way about Adam Scott. Is there one more I can add to that list? Maybe not. Ben Griffin, I think I would add to that list. So there's just a lot of guys that are pretty confident are going to have a good finish, but not able to put it together and win. With Shane Lowry and Cam Young, the story is actually kind of the same. Both of these guys are elite drivers of golf ball who can be good approach players. The problem is that their putter is crazy erratic. If you look at their tee to green game at the PGA Championship, it actually wasn't all that different between Lowry's T6 and Cam Young's T63. Cam Young was definitely worse on approach, but he was gaining strokes off the tee. Lowry was much better on approach. But Lowry gained a lot of strokes at the putter. Cam Young did not. And that was the difference in the 63rd place finish. So I think with those two, the story is largely the same this week. Are they going to gain strokes with the putter? And if they do, they have the upside to win this tournament. If they do not, then they are most certainly not going to win this tournament. But Lowry and Cam Young, I'm putting in very similar boats. I'm probably going to have some of them in DFS, but not a ton of them. From the very top of the board, I've probably got it ranked in terms of the ownership that I will have McIlroy, Theegala, Lowry, Young, Connors is how I would probably rate it. Now, intentionally unincluded in that countdown was two guys that I'm probably going to play a lot of because Sam Burns and Maverick McNeely both feel like guys to me who have the legitimate upside to win this tournament. Sam Burns, I think if you took Rory McIlroy out of this field, is probably the most decorated PGA Tour player in this field because you can't count Lowry and Fleetwood's wins overseas. And he's really had an up and down 2024. But, he's a new father. He tends to play his best at shorter golf courses, and he can get super hot with the putter on any surface. So Sam Burns, he hasn't quite had it with the recent form, so I'm hoping that the ownership is going to be quite down on him, but I really do think that this is a good spot for Sam Burns. He's going to be in a ton of my lineups. And the same can be said for Maverick McNeely. He is a guy who is making pretty much every cut since January. He's had some really good finishes. He's been, up and down with the putter, but it's usually up. But more importantly, his approach play has been really on point lately. So Sam Burns and Maverick McNeely are going to be two guys who I'm going to find in a ton of my lineups this week. Another guy I like is Aaron Rai, just really good performances at a lot of the comp courses, played pretty well at the Charles Schwab Challenge, generally plays his best on shorter courses with bent grass greens, which is what we have here this week. And also one thing I like to see also, he was very good at the Houston Open, finished T7. And that is a course that features a lot of those short grass runoff areas around the green. So there's a lot of chipping off of short grass. So I really like that he has that skill going for him. $8,900, very reasonable price for Aaron Rai. Now, a guy that I do have to talk about is Tom Kim. So for whatever reason, Tom Kim has not quite had the 2023 and 2024 that we were expecting of him after he was a phenom back in 2022. But when you look at his profile, what you do see is this. He has turned himself from not a great off the tee player to now generally a positive off the tee player. An approach game that is erratic but has a super high ceiling, like when he gained almost 7 strokes on approach at the Masters. A decent around the green game that's good but not great, and then the ability to spike with the putter. To me, that's kind of the formula that I want this week. He's going to be good off the tee. He has the ability to spike on approach. He has the ability to spike with the putter. And when you look at his performance at a lot of comp courses, he was runner-up at Royal Liverpool last year. He has a win at the Wyndham Championship, and he finished 7th at the Rocket Mortgage in one of his first PGA Tour starts. So Tom Kim definitely checking a lot of boxes this week, and I am hoping that a lot of the field is not going to be privy to Tom Kim, and I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to get on him because to me, this really has the feeling of a course that has all the makings for a great Tom Kim course. All right, so let's go ahead and end this segment there, and let's go ahead and break down some bets. All right, so this will be a great time. This is the National Open of Canada. Go ahead and talk about all of the Canadians in the field because there are quite a lot of them this week. We already mentioned Corey Connors. Look, if you're just wanting to bet a Canadian to win, he's the most skilled Canadian golfer. He's probably the most likely to win, if we're being honest. Even though I did just put him in my very likely top 20, but very unlikely win club. He's probably the Canadian with the most win equity. He just needs to run a hot putter for 4 days. However, Adam Hadwin and Mackenzie Hughes, I like quite a bit. They're both kind of just, this grinder type, got a great short game. Mackenzie Hughes was pretty good at this course back in 2019. I could definitely see myself playing a little bit of both of these, but I do feel like DraftKings bumped up the price on the two of them because they know that they're playing in their National Open, though. I think that they're a little bit pricey for the form that they have coming in. Speaking of pricey for the form they have coming in, Nick Taylor is not coming in on good form. However, one thing that's interesting about him is that he won this event last year at Oakdale at quite a similar course, in my opinion, coming in off of kind of equally poor form. Except he was doing a little bit better in the ball striking last year at this time than he was this year. This year, he's kind of lost in every aspect of his game. Not a good sign, but he is returning to the type of course that he succeeds at. If you think that Bombing It is going to play well this week, which honestly, with a course that we don't exactly know how it's going to play, it's not a terrible idea to just build a lineup of all guys who have one skill set. Like, hey, I'm just going to play 6 guys on it, or I'm just going to play 6 guys who are great on approach, or 6 guys who play short courses well, or 6 guys who can putt well, and so on, right? And so if you're playing bombers, Taylor Pendrith is probably one of the best choices you could make. He was red hot coming into the PGA Championship. He was a lot of people's favorite value pick, one of my favorite value picks at the PGA Championship, and he let everybody down with a missed cut. But he's sitting here at 7,600, and I definitely think that if bombing is a prevailing strategy, he is a guy who can do that very well this week. Adam Svensson is coming in off of probably the best form he's shown here in 2024. He was quite poor at the start of the season. He had 3 straight missed cuts in Florida, but now he's kind of brought it back, finished 24th at the Charles Schwab Challenge. He's doing better on approach. He's a guy who plays well at short courses. He's a guy who plays well on bent grass. Checks a lot of boxes, in my opinion. I do like Adam Svensson. Another one that I like is Ben Silverman, sitting here at $6,500. You talk about a guy who is good at short courses and who can spike with the putter. Ben Silverman is both of those things. He played well here back in 2019, back when he was a very young player, if I'm not mistaken. So he should be able to do better here this year. $6,500, like Ben Silverman quite a bit. And then the last Canadian I'm going to mention is one that is not all that familiar for American ears. That is Aaron Cockerell. He primarily plays his golf on the DP World Tour. He's $5,400 on DraftKings this week. If I'm being honest, his finishes on the DP World Tour probably should make him about a $6,200 golfer instead of $5,400 playing in his National Open. I would not have a problem firing a dart at a Aaron Cockerell at $5,400. He makes a lot of the rest of your lineup work if you're willing to go down that far. All right, so that was for the Canadian section. All right, so let's go ahead and get out of that mindset. You see what I did there? And let's talk about some other nationality players. So Akshay Bhatia. If you're somebody who likes to take a trip down narrative street, if you're somebody who is looking for a feel-good story, then Akshay Bhatia might be your guy this week. Akshay Bhatia, he grew up in the Triangle area in North Carolina, as did Grayson Murray, and the two of them were great friends. And if you're not aware, Grayson Murray tragically took his own life this past weekend, and just a terrible situation. But Akshay is a really good friend of Grayson Murray's. And if you are somebody who would like to see a good story, then it'd be pretty cool to see Akshay do one, win one for Grayson, and then kind of go out in the interview and give more spotlight to their friendship and his story. And if you're just looking for something to root for this week, Akshay would be a great guy to root for. In terms of the recent form, it looks bad with 2 missed cuts. But his approach play was still great at the PGA Championship. His off the tee play was still great at the Charles Schwab Challenge. He just needs to put it together in all 4 aspects of his game, which he did, by the way, when he won at the Valero Texas Open. So I do think that Akshay is a guy that it can definitely be somebody who you can root for this week. Now, looking down the 7K range, I'm just thinking out loud here, a lot of guys who play short courses well are in this range. However, I think that even in my Rory builds, I'm probably going to be prioritizing that 8K range a little bit more than the 7K range, because I think that you're going to see more ownership in the 7K range. And I do think that there's an equally bit of good course fits in the 8K range, like a Aaron Rai, like a Tom Kim, like the Canadians, like Bhatia. Now, in the 7K range, Mark Hubbard, Daniel Berger, Ben Griffin, Doug Gim, all guys that play short course as well, all guys who are doing pretty well on approach. Mark Hubbard is going to be like the stats guy that everybody likes this week. Really faded at the Charles Schwab Challenge over the weekend, but just a guy who can spike on approach, can spike with the putter at times. He's probably in the top 20 win club, if I'm being honest. Heading on down the board in the low 7K range, I really like Seamus Power this week. I really like him, and I've heard some other, kind of content creators mention him this week. I think that this is a guy who's going to probably get some steam in terms of ownership, because when you look at what he's done lately, he has been elite on approach in 2 of his last 3 starts, and the one that wasn't was the CJ Cup Byron Nelson, which is a super long golf course with a lot of long irons and into mindless big greens. It's not really the type of course that you're going to see this week. But he was great on approach at the Heritage, gaining almost 5 strokes, gained over 8 strokes on approach at the Wells Fargo. Just hasn't really had it with the putter, but you look at his performance at some of the comp courses and he's had some good ones. So I really do think that this could be a really good spot for Seamus Power. If you're somebody who is a recent approach play truther, then he is a guy who needs to be in your lineup. Now, if you're looking for a little bit of international flair, we mentioned how Wentworth is a good comparison for this course. Ryan Fox won at Wentworth last year. Aaron Rai was the runner-up. Robert McIntyre has pretty good history across the pond as well. I don't know his exact history at Wentworth, but he's the guy who definitely has the ceiling to play well here in this environment. I'm not I'm probably going to take a few shots at Robert McIntyre because I don't think he's going to have very much ownership at all at $7,100. Kevin Tway is playing some really good golf as of late. If you think bombing is a viable strategy, he's a guy that you can go with here this week, but he kind of even proved that wrong last week with the T24 at the Charles Schwab Challenge. The guy's just playing some really good golf, and at only $6,700, I think he's playing golf that is much more indicative of a guy at about $7,500. So I have no problem going with Kevin Tway this week. Now, Grayson Sigg was a guy who popped up on my model. Have no problem playing him this week. Mac Meisner, though, is a guy that, and I hope I'm saying that right. I've heard his name pronounced so many different ways. I think it's Mac Meisner. He's been great the last 2 weeks. 13th in Myrtle Beach, 5th at Charles Schwab, gaining about 4 or more strokes on approach in both of those, gaining around the green in both those, gaining with the putter in both of those. Just playing some really good golf. I think from what I am seeing this week, I think he's going to be the chalk value play. And so Ben Silverman that we talked about a little earlier might be a little different. Grayson Sigg might be a little bit different, but I definitely think that Meisner is going to be the popular play here in this mid 6K range. Now, looking down from there, there are only a few more guys that I want to talk about. And when you get down to the low 6Ks and the 5K range, I'm really more just looking to play guys who play this type of course well or have really good recent form coming in. Chez Reavie is a guy who tends to play short course as well, as is Ryan Moore, as is Chandler Phillips. Another guy that would fit that description, I would say, is Robbie Shelton, Kelly Craft. Matthew Neesmith definitely fits that description. Matthew Neesmith might be my favorite of the bunch, though. When you look at what he has done recently, he is generally a pretty good iron player, but he has put together 2 made cuts and a pretty good finish at the Charles Schwab Challenge without being good with his irons at all. In long term, he's a pretty good iron player. So I really don't know what's up with that, but the fact that he's playing well without one of the best aspects of his game being very good is a good sign, and I think that means that he is kind of primed to turn it around a little bit. Hayden Buckley is another short course king. Coming in 5th at the Charles Schwab, he kind of faded a little bit over the weekend, but if you think that this is just the type of environment where guys who play short courses play well, he's a guy you got to consider. After his performance at the Colonial, I was very surprised to see him at only $5,500. And then the last guy I'm going to mention is David Lipsky, $5,400 after finishing 9th at Colonial. Believe it or not, David Lipsky had the best tournament in terms of strokes gained approach of anybody in the 2024 season. That's crazy. The only, believe it or not, second place was Tony Finau at the PGA Championship. So David Lipsky, great on approach last week at the Charles Schwab, was able to finish 9th. If you are an approach play truther, then David Lipsky has got to be the guy for you here this week. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick breather now that we mentioned the whole board, and we're going to take a look at some one-and-done picks. All right, so after a pretty crappy start of the season, I am starting to recover a little bit here in the one-and-done that I've been picking on the show. I had Tony Finau last week at Colonial, which was not terrible, but really in the non-signature events, I really think for the rest of the season for the non-signature events, you're just hoping to catch lightning in a bottle and pick a winner. And if you don't, it's really not that big of a deal, but you're going to really need to cash in on the signature events. And there are 3 of them coming up after this tournament. So what we're going to do, we're actually going to have a one and done special talking about those 3 events and how important they are for the rest of the one and done season. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you can check that out if you are a one and done player. Anyway, let's talk about this week. So with this not being a signature event and not featuring a huge purse, I do not think this is the week to play Rory, even though he has won at this course, even though he is the best golfer in the field. He is the huge favorite. I think you would be better served trying to play him at a signature event or a major in which a 4th or 5th place finish would be equivalent to a win here in terms of dollar amount. So Rory is probably a pass for me this week, and I think he's going to be a pass for a lot of people this week. But not a lot of people have him left. So what I think that's going to create is a situation where Sahith Theegala and Tommy Fleetwood become the absolute chalk plays here this week. They're very clearly 2 of the best golfers in the field. They should be decent course fits. Tommy Fleetwood was 2nd at Oakdale last year. I think that Tommy Fleetwood will probably be the most chalky pick. And so if you are front running, I do think that Fleetwood would probably be a guy you could go with and feel pretty safe and pretty confident about. Like I said, I feel really good about Fleetwood coming in the top 20, but not necessarily winning the golf tournament. Tom Kim is an interesting one because there's a few events on the schedule that I really like Tom Kim at. This would probably be one So if you're not saving Tom Kim for Wyndham, if you have like another name in mind for the Wyndham Championship, or if you just think you can find somebody else by the time we get to Wyndham, then to me, Tom Kim is a great pick this week. I also think Sam Burns is a great pick this week. I use Sam Burns up at the Valspar in pretty much all of my one and done entries. And so I do not have Sam Burns left, but I do not see another natural spot on the schedule for Burns. And so if you have Sam Burns left, you're probably in a select few, so you're going to be using him at a very high leverage situation. I really think that Sam Burns is a really solid play this week. I really like, if I had Burns, that's who I would be playing. I also think Shane Lowry is a really solid play, and I really don't think you're going to use him anywhere down the road personally. He's not necessarily the type of guy I would play in a Scottish Open or an Open Championship. So I definitely think Lowry's a pretty solid play. We mentioned Bhatia. I'm kind of holding on to Bhatia, though, because same deal with Eric Cole. What I think is going to happen is over the summer, we're going to see one of these kind of jabroni field events like the John Deere or the 3M Open or the Rocket Mortgage, where Akshay and Eric Cole and guys of that skill are the favorite. And I would rather play them when they are the favorite than when they are 40, 50 to 1, if that makes sense. So I'm going to be kind of holding on to those two guys. I probably wouldn't go that much further down the board than this. I do think that Aaron Rye makes for a very solid pick. Keith Mitchell, Adam Svensson might make for a little bit outside the box picks as well. I am actually going to go with this week. I'm going to go he's way down the board on official world golf ranking, but he's not that far down on the odds board. For the one that I'm picking here on the show, I'm going to go ahead and click Maverick McNeely here this week. I don't really see another course later on in the schedule to use him. He's coming in great form. This is a great course fit for what I perceive Maverick's game to be. He is a guy who can spike with the putter. He excels on courses with small greens for whatever reason, and these are some of the smallest. So I really do think this is a good spot for Maverick McNeely. That is my guy that I am rolling with here this week, and I'm sitting just outside the money. So if McNeely can beat the likes of a Thiegawa and a Fleetwood and the other guys that are going to be chalky this week, then I might be able to find myself back in the money here before too long. So anyway, that does it for this episode, guys. That is the RBC Canadian Open 2024. We talked about the course, what it is like, how it has been changed, and kind of how I think there's a multitude of paths to success here that all end in the same place. And hopefully was able to give you guys some good information that is going to allow you to pick out some winners in DFS, betting, and one and done. If you like what you saw here in this video, please hit the like button and please subscribe to the channel so that way you can be with us for the rest of the PGA Tour season. If you're listening on audio, please rate and review. It helps me out a ton, and I cannot stress enough how much I appreciate it when you guys do that. The reason that this podcast shows up on searches, the reason that new people find the show is because of the watchers who like and subscribe and rate and review. And so please, if I've done you any favors, please help me out by liking, subscribing, rating, review. All right, that does it for this episode, y'all. Like I said, we're going to have the one and done show coming out next week. That is going to be like a one and done mid-season special. I'm still trying to figure out what to name it. And then we're going to have next week's Tournament of the Memorial covered. We are going to have some NFL content, college football content upcoming. So make sure you're subscribed so you can be with us for all that. But other than that, that pretty much does it for this week, y'all. Like I said, hopefully I'm able to give you guys some good advice, able to pick some winners here this week at the RBC Canadian Open. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point. Best of luck to you this week, and I will see you next time.